strong relationship. Foods, goods, annual burning. And so the chinkapin is a relative. And there are some places that have chinkapin here today, and it's a delicious, delicious nut. Okay, and I wanted to share some of the things that our groups have done together kind of in this effort to learn and share what we know about plants and traditional Cherokee foods. So we've done several different presentations in different communities. We've done, here's an example at the very top of making and teaching how to make bean bread at the Muldrow Community Center. And what was interesting about that is we had a traditional Cherokee speaker help with a presentation, and that was really, really neat. So the next presentation we did out at Brushy Community Center was a Kanuji workshop. And in that workshop, we had 2 fluent Cherokee speakers, and they did the presentation completely in the Cherokee language. And I thought that was really important because it brought in some of the elders and it taught some of the young folks some critical words for our traditional Cherokee foods. And the more that I learn, the more that I see that Cherokee language, Cherokee foods, and Cherokee land are inextricably linked. Some other fun things we've done, we did treasure hunts at the Lion Switch Community Center, so I would go out beforehand and find some plants like, oh, there's a blackberry, there's poison ivy, there's, what did we find out there? Jewelweed, and we would send everyone out there, and whoever could identify each of those plants first got a prize. So those have been really fun. In another group, something that we've done through a Facebook group is to organize seed and plant exchanges, and this has been just a really fun way to get together with other Cherokees, exchange heirloom seeds, some non-heirloom seeds, and really exchange information. It's been really, really neat to be able to see how Cherokee folks are so passionate about their foods and their plants and kind of taking a stand on wanting to protect them and to pass this knowledge down. I wanted to talk a little bit about health and well-being and related to Cherokee plants and foods. So some of you might be familiar with the story about the origin of disease in medicine, but to sum it up real briefly, for some of you who haven't heard the story, humans were being very unkind to our animal relatives, to our bug relatives, to the salamanders. We were over-hunting, we were degrading the land, and the animals had enough. They got into a council, and every animal council came up with a disease to give humans, to punish them for the treatment that humans have been giving to the animals and the other four-leggeds and wingeds. It's a really neat story if you haven't read it. But the hero of the story is plants, because despite our bad behavior, plants came to our rescue, and they continue to come to our rescue. So the plants, for every disease that was given to humans, they gave a remedy. And so I think that really sets the tone for being grateful to the plants and to know that we would not be here if not for them. So I'm going to give just a couple of examples of plants and plants that I've used in the past for kind of medicinal treatment. So these are really like very low-level plant medicine treatments. So many of you are probably familiar with echinacea and elderberry. I make syrups of echinacea and elderberry from native plants here in the Cherokee Nation Reservation, and my brilliant niece, Lily, came up with the idea of making gummies. So that's Lily there, making gummies, and it's been really great. This was all pre-COVID. She's grown up a little bit, but pre-COVID, trying to travel with a mason jar of elderberry syrup was very challenging, so the gummies made it really nice. I also wanted to share with you a plant that's it's kind of plentiful right now. I've seen it around town, actually. It's called jewelweed. Is anyone familiar with this plant, jewelweed? Quite a few people. It's a beautiful plant. In Cherokee, it's called walela. udilagisti, which means the hummingbird eats it. And if you've ever seen a big kind of grove of jewelweed, you'll see those hummingbirds flying down and drinking the nectar. So jewelweed's an incredible plant, especially for poison ivy. The research has shown that it's a very effective treatment for poison ivy. So I like to make kind of like a tea. I like to freeze it, put it in my freezer, and if anyone has poison ivy, kind of use these ice cubes. And in spring, there's just a ton of medicinal plants in this region. Some of them are mullein, which is not native. There's also elderberry flowers, yarrow, rose, and echinacea. And kind of going back to that previous point about the relationship between our traditional foods and our language, what I am starting to understand and really want to learn more about is the importance of our language in our food and in our food systems. So for example, the Cherokee word for yarrow is salol gatog, which means a squirrel's tail. And it's the plant on the far left here. And so if you've ever seen it, it looks like a bushy squirrel's tail. So for a novice like me trying to learn what is yarrow, it's much easier. There's a story about yarrow and Achilles and Greek, and that's good. And that helped stop the bleeding, and that's a good story. But in Cherokee, it tells you exactly what it looks like. I have never seen a plant that looks like salol gato, that looks like a squirrel's tail. Another example is rose, and we have wild rose here, and in Cherokee the word is gistu unigisti. So the rabbit eats it, and that's really important to learn about the relationship that plants and animals have together. There's other, Cherokee language is descriptive, and it talks about relations and relationships. So you really learn a lot about how to find the plant and what its relationship is with the rest of the ecological system. Another example is there's a fern called a bear lies on it, which is, I learned that in North Carolina, so that's probably a critical fern to know about. So I'd like to shift from foraging to talk a little bit about gardening. So learning about traditional Cherokee foods, we have to learn about Cherokee agriculture. And corn is a critical aspect of that, but there's lots of cultivated plants that Cherokees have cultivated, have used, continue to use today. And so the first picture there is, many of you are probably familiar with the term three sisters, the corn, beans, and squash. So these seeds were generously donated from friends in North Carolina who have been gardening with Cherokee heirloom seeds for many, many years near our mother town of Gadua. And it's been a real gift and treat to have my son be able to grow these three sisters every year, so much so that the middle picture is my son shoveling manure, and no complaints. He's fine with it. He loves it. And the last one is our garden this year. You can see corn and squash and sunflowers. And I'm getting the squash bugs off, but he is helping and also playing. But it's really, really wonderful because he is really learning a lot about our heirloom plants and learning to love gardening. And you can see that in the very first picture. So for a 2 or 3 or 4-year-old to put an heirloom Cherokee seed in the ground, to water it throughout the year, and then to harvest it, his face here is kind of full of excitement and love and pride for doing that. Some other heirloom crops that you see here, again, these are from North Carolina, are Cushaw squash and Georgia candy roaster. And that was a big one. That was a 22-pounder. I guess Georgia candy roasters like being here. And underneath it, when I picked it up, was a huge black widow, which we rehomed to the backyard. So the next part of the process with the heirloom seeds is cooking. And like I said, now my son has learned that if he's something that you grow, you have ownership. He loves taking the corn off the husk. And there's a couple other pictures of folks getting together and cooking traditional meals. The picture on the far right is when I was cooking bean bread and it was going awful, and someone said, "Move over." And so we had a friend really help with the bean bread. The consistency can be tricky. And a picture of my son watching and learning about these kind of traditional cooking culinary techniques. And I know we're getting to lunchtime, so I apologize in advance. I wish we could have made a traditional meal for everyone here, but I will offer pictures. So here are some of the meals that we've made in our community groups, and our family, and our friend groups. You'll see bean bread, you'll see squash, you'll see our mushrooms and some wild greens. Some wild greens here are, there's watercress, there is not poke. Does anyone eat poke salad? Few people. Does anyone eat kochan? A couple? Okay. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. So this is the final product. And I'd like to take a minute just to step back and kind of put my researcher cap on, because I think a lot of our traditional foodways, our traditional Cherokee ecological knowledge really deserves attention. Okay, so I apologize for a little bit of lack of pictures, but please bear with me. I wanted to share some stats with you all. So I think many of us are familiar with, we don't eat like that every day anymore. Our diet and exercise patterns have been, drastically changed prior to pre-colonization, and that's due to forced European farming methods, agricultural methods, prohibition of our traditional ecological methods and life ways, forced relocation. We're not in the same environment in which Cherokee language was born. And also environmental degradation that prohibits people from practicing these life ways. Some of you might know this, but to me it's really impressive that the world food, 80% of the world's food comes from the Americas. North, Central, and South America, indigenous people cultivated 80% of the food that the world eats now. But about 70% of the food that we eat in the United States are from foreign crops, which is just shocking. And indigenous people have designed some of the most advanced and sustainable farming and agricultural techniques that have ever existed. And there's a myth that colonizers arrived to these virgin forests, and that's just not true. And it's important to know that that is not our real history. And I'd like to share a quote with you from Dr. Cronin. And he said the forests of New England, the Midwest, and the Southeast had been disturbed by varying degrees by Indian activity prior to European occupation. Agricultural clearing and burning had converted much of the forest into successional fallow growth and into semi-permanent grassy openings like meadows, barrens, plains, glades, savannas, prairies, often of considerable size. Much of the mature forest was characterized by an open, herbaceous understory reflecting frequent ground fires. And he said, quote, the DeSoto expedition, consisting of many people, a large horse herd, and many swine, passed through 10 states without difficulty of movement. So indigenous people have been interacting with their forests, with the waterways, with their ecology through caretaking also, not just harvesting. So another fact I wanted to share with you, that pre-colonization indigenous people had on average a variety of 300 different types of food a year, and now we're down to about the average American diet, the ingredients are 12 to 30 foods. So you can just imagine the lack of nutrients that we have. So due to some of the reasons I've already talked about, specifically environmental degradation, around 75% of the world's plant genetic diversity has been lost. And this lack of diversity is related to a decline in the nutrition of native peoples' diets, with a growing epidemic of obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. And what's also on the table for extinction, along with these plants, is our traditional life ways, our traditional food ways, those traditional culinary skills. Me messing up the bean bread, that's a good example. Ecological farming practices, and entire cultures are at risk. So comprising less than 5% of the world's population, indigenous people protect 80% of global diversity. This is an area that Cherokees have been leading and continue to lead for many years. So we know that indigenous people suffer from health, disease, physical and mental health at higher rates than any other population in the United States. But cultural continuity, including plant and food systems, relate to improved physical and mental health of indigenous people. Some people here might have heard the phrase, culture is medicine, indigenous food is medicine. So traditional Cherokee diets are more micronutrient dense. They reflect the locality and the seasonality of foods, and they engage families and communities. And that all makes for healthier people and communities. So I'll get into some of them specifically. I've had a couple of these images up, but if you haven't seen them before, this is a beautiful poster through the Cherokee Nation Language Department. You can find it on the website. This one, the content is from David Crawler. And there's a series of ecological posters that are in the Cherokee and English language. So we'll talk a little bit about nutrition, but the diet of traditional Cherokees, pre-colonial diet, had a large variety. Foods arrived in seasons, and they arrived in seasons for a reason. They involved exercise. To forage, you have to walk around. To have agriculture, you have to dig holes. You have to provide water. And we'll find out about this a little bit more, but these are very difficult dishes sometimes, as you saw me fail, to make unless you know really what you're doing. And to grow a whole crop of corn, one person can't do this. Cherokee food systems are communal food systems, and they're most efficient that way. And also, I'll talk a little bit about the importance of Cherokee food systems and our ecology and the preservation of our ecology. But to start, I want to talk about nutrition. So this is, again, a study that was done in 2019. There's a lot of graphs and charts. I won't bore you with all of them. Hopefully, this one you can see a bit clearly. What they've done here is they've compared pre-colonial indigenous foods with their kind of counterpart to today. So on the bottom, it says cattail shoots versus asparagus, wild plums versus plums you find in your grocery store. Let's see, a few others are wild rose hips versus cranberries, things that we know are high in vitamin C. But on the left, they are much more nutrient dense. So the nutrients, these are the macro elements: calcium, magnesium, potassium, and phosphorus. They went through many, and the trend was that the pre-colonial indigenous foods outperformed our current counterparts that we find in the grocery store today. One study looked particularly at the nutrition value of corn, bean, and squash, our heirloom seeds, versus what we find in the grocery store, and they found the exact same trend, that the pre-colonial seeds, the heirloom seeds and crops were much more nutrient dense. And they also found this, I wanted to share this quote with you by Dr. Sarkar from 2020. Previous and current studies with the three sisters crops, the corn, bean, and squash, have found strong phenolic-linked antioxidant, which is assisting with cancer, anti-diabetic, and anti-hypertensive, that's blood pressure, properties of these traditional plant foods. So this is an amazing study that really shows that our food is our medicine. Another fact I wanted to share with you all, people talk about physical health, and it makes a lot of sense, but sometimes we forget about the role of mental health and the role of of diet and mental health. And in fact, there are neurotransmitters that are responsible for us feeling happy, joyful, alert, focused, motivated. Those neurotransmitters cannot work without certain vitamins: B, D, magnesium, omega-3. Next to each of them is the percentage in which the average American is deficient in their diet: 95%, 10, 52, 100%. When we look at pre-colonial Cherokee foods, we see that we are very rich in all of those. There's our corn, beans, and squash again for their vitamin B and magnesium. Mushrooms, wild bird eggs. Getting outside, being in the sunshine for vitamin D. And omega-3s with hickory nuts, which we've already talked about, as well as a variety of other nuts, black walnuts, chestnuts, and seeds and wild meats. So there has been some research done on people that are eating just traditional indigenous foods. I put some of my favorites up there. They've kind of taken place all over Indian country. And so there's examples with the Haudenosaunee community, the Pueblo community, and Anishinaabe community. And they've monitored the health and well-being of the people who have done these diets before and after. The Haudenosaunee diet is a really interesting one. They asked people to eat traditional Haudenosaunee foods for 90 days. And this particular project was developed by community members. So they were provided bi-weekly food boxes and offered workshops, cooking classes, and individual support from a dietitian. And they were provided a list of traditional foods from which they could eat. So some of the results are really impressive from these studies, and I've only listed a few. And they've varied. Some people eat traditional diets 2 weeks, and they look at their health. Some people did, like I said, up to 90 days. And some people did like 25% of their diet was pre-colonial foods, some people up to 100. But it was clear, the results demonstrated that the participants lost weight, they had improved BMI, they had improved blood sugar, they had improved mental health, they had reduced depression. In the Haudenosaunee one I just shared, they had reduced complaints of pain, and they reported that they felt more connected to their community. So these are really, really astounding results about what a traditional diet can do for us as individuals, us in the community. Okay, so I'm going to shift gears one more time. Here's another one of those posters. It kind of has the bug poster, the SCOE poster that you can find on the Cherokee Nation language page. And I bring this up because I don't know what your all's experiences have been trying to grow foods in Oklahoma, but the last few years it has been challenging. I have had to hand pollinate almost everything, especially those squash. We do not have pollinators here anymore like we used to. And I would like to share a quote. You know, after finding this out for myself, wondering why my squash isn't growing, it starts to grow and then it kind of shrivels up. Then finding out that we just don't have our pollinators like we used to, I tried to do a little bit of research. And so here's a quote from The Guardian. It says, "The world's insects are hurtling down the path to extinction, threatening a catastrophic collapse of nature's ecosystems. More than 40% of insect species are declining and a third are endangered." This analysis found the rate of extinction is 8 times faster than that of mammals, birds, and reptiles. The total mass of insects is falling by 2.5% a year, suggesting that they could vanish within 1 century. The planet is now at the start of a 6th mass extinction, the first one that is human-caused in history, with huge losses already reported in larger animals that are easier to study. But insects are the most varied and abundant animal, outweighing humanity by 17 times. They are essential for the proper functioning of all ecosystems, the researchers say, as food for other creatures, pollinators, and recyclers of nutrients. So we will not have food if we don't have insects. So I saw that firsthand. I learned a little bit more about it. So I started a pollinator garden, and I tried to start a pollinator garden right next to my food garden, my agriculture garden. And out here, there are a lot of big lawns with a lot of grass that takes up a lot of water, a lot of insecticides, and produces nothing useful for our ecology. So what I did was I started with cardboard. We tried to put some manure down with a couple truckloads, and I had my trusty helper here. And a really wonderful experience. That first year, I started seeing bugs I have never seen before. In the second year, I met up with some folks for an amazing organization in Oklahoma called the Tribal Alliance for Pollinators. I loved learning about the bugs. I loved seeing them. I loved not having to hand pollinate so much anymore. So I extended the garden, the pollinator garden, year 2, and we had a free consult from the Tribal Alliance for Pollinators. They came out and they provided free pollinator plants. And so finally, this is year 3, which was last year, it became a very full ecosystem. For the first time, I saw the entire life cycle of a ladybug. I had never seen that before. As an adult, that's embarrassing. And here's a few pictures of some of the things that kind of came to our yard that we had never seen before. A variety of butterflies, a variety of moths. There's that kind of bottom right is that ladybug. And I and my son were hooked on butterflies and pollinators. And here's a picture of my son. So every year now we try to bring 1 or 2 into a butterfly a cage, just so we can sort of watch and learn the process. I didn't know the stages of a monarch butterfly before this. Again, I felt embarrassed to say that. But my son is at 4, knows the cycle, and he understands the cycle. He asks, does that place spray? Should I forage? Should I eat there? Edgy, should I not eat that? Or, he says things like, Edgy, there's a caterpillar out here. Do we have the right foods for them? He knows that butterflies each have a host plant and they're nectar plants. And it's amazing. It's been a beautiful process to watch him learn something I wish I had when I was a child. So with all of this amazing knowledge that I have been gifted with and all of the collaborations with the community, some projects have emerged. In fact, a lot of projects have emerged. I'll talk to you all about 2, and then we might have time for questions, I think. So I wanted to highlight the American Indian Resource Center. They're an amazing organization that's been in Tahlequah since the 1980s. They provide services to over 10,000 American Indian youth a year. And these brilliant ladies really wanted to bring children out to our ecology and learn some of the things that we've talked about, traditional Cherokee foods, our ecological systems, etc. So they have leased an area, a camp called Camp 7 Star, that's located in the heart of Cherokee Nation, just on the banks of Lake Tenkiller, with 260 acres of land. And what's been really amazing about this place is seeing children come out. We've had the Tribal Alliance for Pollinators come, and children learn about planting these pollinators, learning about the life cycle of these plants. So through all of that learning, we received a grant from Oklahoma State University, the Center for Indigenous Health Research and Policy, to put all of this learning together into a curriculum for Cherokee youth. So we have some of our advisory board members here, but we have decided to put together folks from Cherokee Nation, from Eastern Band, and discuss what is it that our youth need to know about our ecology, about our plants, about our foodways, so that they can be informed Cherokee citizens of this sovereign nation. So we're still working on this particular project. We plan to deliver it next year at the beautiful Camp 7 Star to middle school age children. We estimate it will be a 2-week program. We'd like to start every class with a traditional Cherokee story. There's so many stories about our plants with so many Cherokee values and lessons and critical aspects of our language in them. I've shared with you one already about the origin of disease in medicine. There's amazing stories about ginger, other plants. So I also just wanted to say that this has been an amazing project because I can't even list the number of people that are passionate about teaching our children these things. The collaborators go on and on, Cherokee Nation, etc. So I will move now to our second project I wanted to share with you. So someone told me recently, my son is the guinea pig for all these programs, and I'm okay with that. But when thinking about creating a trajectory for the next generation and the next generations of Cherokee people, things that are critical are our Cherokee life ways, are our language, and our relation to our lands and our ecology. So through a wonderful group of 7 Cherokee women with decades and decades of experience, folks who've been teaching the Cherokee language, people who have been second language learners, and several of us who are moms who are trying to learn, trying to teach our children, we've created a program that we've called Little Cherokee Seeds. In this program, it will start in fall. We plan to bring Cherokee mothers and infants together with teachers who we're calling second mothers. People are going to recreate what it's like living in a traditional Cherokee home. It will be completely in the Cherokee language, no English. It will be completely culturally immersed. There won't be a curriculum. The curriculum will be our seasons and our cultural activities with the land and the plants leading us. It will be a primarily outdoor program as well in a forested environment. So this is the culmination of the life works of a lot of Cherokee women, people, families, and communities, and we're really excited about this and hoping to do our best to teach this knowledge to the next generation. I did put a couple of links here if you're interested to learn more about the American Indian Resource Center. They have a website, they have a Facebook. We are taking applications for both programs. Let me stop. We are taking applications for the Little Cherokee Seeds program, the Mother and Infant Language and Culture Immersion program right now. That closes next week. And we would be happy to accept any donations to help support either of these programs as well. And I wanted to end on one of my favorite plants. This is Koksog, elderberry. And just wanted to say, what do? Thank you, everyone, for coming. And I hope this was helpful and that you enjoyed it. Do we do questions or no? I think we can take 1 or 2 questions or discussions. She asked, what's the part of the cedar do you use? So the part that I showed you was just kind of those leaves that come out. Now you'll see the kind of juniper berries used a lot in like cooking. People like to put them in pot roast. I have heard that it's very high in vitamin C, but we can Google it and double check. Yeah. Well, I am sort of an individual who works full-time at a university but loves to talk plants. And so if a Cherokee Community Center is interested, I'm happy to come. I've been to Claremore, Brushy, Muldrow, a few other places. So, we've done like lip balms from plants that we forage, salves, syrups, that sort of thing. Again, I'm kind of a learner, and I like to bring people with me that know more than me too. So I am always happy to talk with anyone about doing some more classes. And if there's something that you want to learn about that I don't know, I'm happy to try to find someone too. I wish there were classes for everyone on this content, but for a lot of the reasons, we're just at this stage of revitalizing. So, hope that's helpful. Just come find me. I can give you my email address. The best way to reach me, I can come find you afterwards too and write it down. But my email address is Melissa, MELISSA .e.lewis@gmail.com. I've also been working a little bit with Cherokee Nation Public Health. They have some videos online about stinging nettles, teas, pestos. They might also be a good resource.
What was that again?
Cherokee Nation Public Health. I believe they have a YouTube page. Okay, so the question was about the chestnut blight. And so the chestnut blight occurred both kind of in the southeast United States, and there is, gosh, I wish I had the right information. There is like a chestnut society, and there's several different thoughts about how to return chestnuts to that area. And one of them being there are still some chestnuts there, and so those would inherently be blight resistant. Other people are mixing strains, and there's also Ozark Chinkapin Foundation. They have a lot of wonderful resources, but same sort of thing. The blight took out many, but I know people in this region that still have some on their property, and so that, I don't know, we would have to talk to Cherokee Nation a little bit more about that. If they're doing any investigations on where those particular plants are still, and what would be the next step. Is that helpful? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, there are a number of books about Cherokee plants and Cherokee foods. Not a lot on Cherokee medicines. And if you see me afterwards, I can show you a list if that's helpful. I should have had that up here for everybody. Okay. Do I need to put it on? Oh, okay. What's that?
It's 11:40.
Oh, okay. All right. Are there any more questions? Okay. Thank you all for sticking in here on this sweaty day. You all take care. Have a good rest of your holiday.